right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. If you're just joining us, I'm Teresa Ferguson. I'm the Executive Director of AustinUP. AustinUP is a nonprofit community alliance that works on issues related to the future of aging in Austin. And jobs and employment is one of those issues. We'll go ahead and get started. Hey, everybody. Wait. If you're just joining us, I'm Teresa Ferguson. I'm the Executive Director of AustinUP. Okay, sorry.
That's a wicked echo.
Yeah, really strange. Anyway, AustinUP is presenting, during COVID, we are presenting different presentations about job search in order to prepare older adults for the job search, because as you might expect, it is more challenging. That process is more challenging during this time of COVID. Let's see. So this event, and I'll let Gary introduce himself, but this event kind of came from the last presentation that Gary led for us. And he is, again, ageism was touched on just briefly during that presentation. And then we thought afterwards, maybe it would be a good idea to just talk about ageism during the job search process and allow attendees to give feedback and kind of make it more of a Q&A, an ongoing Q&A. And so you can ask questions, you can give feedback either by turning off or unmuting yourself and doing it yourself, or you can do it in the chat box, either to everyone, or you can send your comments to me personally, individually. I'm happy either way. All right. So first, Gary, if you'll give us a little introduction.
Sure. Just kind of a quick overview of my career history, so you kind of understand the perspective that that I come from. I actually started my career as a software engineer at NASA known Space Station Control Center. So I've done some very complex technical things. I did very large IT projects back in the day for American Express and Lehman Brothers and Intel and the rest. And during that period of time, hired a lot of people to join my teams. I was fortunate that our company got acquired by Sprint, so I had the wherewithal to start a company. And what I found was that over the first half of my career, if you will, the thing that I had done that was the most value was really establish the way that our company really hired better than the competition. So I got very interested in not only hiring and recruiting, but aligning people with work that's going to be meaningful to them, so that they, so that they work, so they work hard, so that they can pull on the rope, so that it just became meaningful to try to make that alignment with people into work that matters for them. Since 2000, I've been essentially a recruiting and hiring consultant. I've run companies as large as 35 recruiters. Right now, I run a very small company called Hire Factors that essentially I do corporate employment and corporate recruiting consulting inside of companies. I recruit and interview every single day. I've been inside of at least 350 different companies in the last 20 years and seen how they hire in some material sort of way. And those range from very large corporations, Fortune 50 companies, all the way down to tiny startups across the globe, primarily in North America, but kind of across the globe. I've been first or second person to well over 10,000 hires at this point in time. So I've seen a lot. I would say I've seen it all, but it surprises me every single day what all goes on. So I'm here to share with you everything that I possibly can, and specifically with regard to any questions you may have. And our topic here is ageism, but and those kinds of topics, but pretty much anything you want to throw at me. And my point of view is, as someone who's been on the hiring side of the equation primarily, but been very interested in and have been doing speaking to audiences of professionals who are looking to make a move in their career, I'm just really curious and fascinated about how all this stuff works. So I've seen a lot, and I'm here to tell you in response to your questions, what it is that I would do, having seen everything that I've seen in the situation that you posed to me. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. One of the questions that we get very frequently is, do I have to change my resume or to hide or mask the length of my career?
Sure.
So what would be your answer to something like that?
You know what, and this is where we'll probably see that I would say I'm a bit of a contrarian, but that would be an understatement. I'm a pretty strong contrarian. I think that there's this myth that I'll call it out there, that people commonly talk about, cutting your resume off after, say, 10 years or so. And what I can tell you as somebody who essentially, I make my living because people get hired. And I would never present you as a candidate to one of my clients, one of my hiring managers, with them possibly having the understanding or the belief that you might be significantly younger than you actually are. And here's the reason why. I've had significant, let's say, numbers of times when I've experienced a hiring manager or an organization have someone show up whose resume was cut off at 10 years, which, you reasonably thought somebody might be in their mid 30s or so, and followed up with me and called and said, look, I don't care how old someone is, but I really feel misled, right? I feel so. My belief is that it creates a bit of an integrity problem. I believe that maybe people could get a few more interviews. I'm not sure that they get hired more. And more importantly, what I think is that if it were me, the whole idea is to embrace not only my age, but who I am, where I'm at in my career, and things of that nature. If you want to shave a year or two off or what have you, fine. But I think it works against you if you end up having that moment where somebody's surprised by that. The other thing that I suggest with regard to kind of your resume perspective and the rest is that any of the techniques that somebody might use to try to hide something, their age, gaps in their resume, whatever it is, those of us who do what I do professionally, we know all the tricks. So as an example, if your education has no dates on it, okay, I know you're trying to hide something. If you just have years on your jobs, you say, 2012 through 2014, I'm kind of going, yeah, I bet there's gaps and stuff that are in there. So all the different things that people do to try to change the truths that are about themselves, I just kind of think they work against you. I think they create integrity issues, which are often bigger than the real issues that they're trying to hide. My general suggestion is that you embrace where you're at in your career and in your life and the rest, get crystal clear on where it is you want to go, and and tell your story. There is somebody out there who will appreciate your story as it is. And I don't think I would never advise somebody to really try to change it a whole lot, quite frankly.
That's good. Anybody have any feedback about that?
It's bizarre to hear because I've heard so much about, chop it off, chop it off, chop it off. And I'm a INTJ. So the idea of, to me, it's like dishonest, right?
Me too.
It really struck me that way.
Yeah.
And I can see, putting it down to like, okay, it doesn't relate. So I just put it in as, a name and a date, this is the company and this is the timeline, right? If you need to shrink it down to fit 2 pages, but,
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I don't mean to be crude, but just kind of to the point is I get paid because people get hired, and I would never present you to a client or to a hiring manager in any way, be it your age or in any way, something that seemed to be misleading. I think that it not only reduces the likelihood that I get paid, it increases I think the integrity problem is a bigger problem than the real problem, right? What somebody might be perceiving as the real problem. The only other thing
strange to hear though, because you're like one of 100 HR kind of folks that recruiters or whatnot that I've ever heard that from.
And what's interesting about that, I wouldn't put myself in the HR category. I hardly even put myself in the recruiting category. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business guy. I've run businesses. I've been in the technology business. And here's what I think might be the difference is that there are a lot of well-intentioned people who are out there with regard to particularly, career advice, career advisors, career strategists, and things of that nature, who they've never been a hiring manager. They've never built a company. They've never made payroll. And the same is true for a lot of recruiters. So a lot of the advice I see being dispensed is from people who they've had very different experiences that I've had. And I think that, at least for me, those people who have understood what it means to be on the hiring manager side, to be on the business owner side, to be on the side where, they're really the true stakeholder, may have a little bit different point of view than maybe what you've seen. So, consider where the message comes from, I guess, maybe is the message. But like I said, I'm a bit of a contrarian. I think that, So.
So Gary, another question, similar lines. What can you say about automated tracking systems that you spit out resumes with more than X years of experience?
You know what? I'm not sure that I've literally seen one that spit anybody out with more than X years worth of experience. The more common thing that happens in these applicant tracking systems, and just to give you some perspective, I've probably used, there are hundreds that are out there. I've probably used the 15 most commonly used ones within the last couple of years in some meaningful way, as in terms of being an administrator on the back end, or one of my clients is using them, or I've helped them implement them, or what have you. The majority of them are set up such that it's not even keywords. The main way that they screen is counting the words that are in your resume and looking at the words in your resume and seeing how many of those words in your resume match the words that are in the job description. And most of them are not sophisticated enough to even distinguish between meaningful keywords and even a word like unique or, thorough or, whatever the word happens to be. So I'm not aware of any that, although I wouldn't doubt it, that have something to do with, length of employment or something. I just personally haven't seen that. The short version of so the majority of people who get screened out when they apply for a job get screened out in the very early stages before a human being who knows what they're talking about even engages with you. And so if you were to take a job description and you were to put your name and your contact information up at the top, you'd get a 98% match, right? If it was somebody on the receiving end like me, they might think it's funny and actually have a conversation with it anyway, but you're probably going to get screened out for having used the job description. But the simple and quick way to try to increase the match, if you will, in that is literally you can copy and paste the text of the job description at the bottom of your resume. You can literally get rid of all the ands and the these and the ors and things like that and end up with a block of text at the bottom of your resume that's 3, 4, 5, 6 lines long that really is a lot of the words that are from the job description. Now, you can then take some of those, pardon me, and where applicable, move them up if you really want to spend the time on doing that. But the truth is, by the time anybody gets down to looking at the bottom of your resume, they've already decided that they're interested in you. And having that block of words down at the bottom is not going to cause you a problem, right? So that's the simplest way that I know to get through that whole applicant tracking system issue.
Interesting.
Do I have time for one other comment on that?
Yes, please.
So I think the more important way and the more direct way is that if it were me, I might not would apply for a job online at all. I'm not suggesting that maybe you don't apply for a job online, but what I would do is that if you go to LinkedIn and you look up that company, you can go to an advanced search. And if you'd like me to show you sometime later on, I can. You can go to advanced search. You can look for the recruiters. You can look for the likely hiring managers. You can send a connection request to them. If they accept your connection request, you get an email address. For some of them, you get Twitter, you get other ways of contacting them. And then my suggestion is you skip to the front of the line by essentially direct connecting with those people and get past those hurdles that are in your way. The applicant tracking system's in your way, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So I know your viewpoint is contrarian, and that's kind of why I wanted you here today.
Right.
But there are, to be realistic, there are recruiters who might be put off by someone with 25 to 30 years of experience in an industry. And so how do you get around or cut to the chase and figure out what they're really looking for and what they're really hoping to avoid? So how can we present?
I've got two comments about that. One is that I don't think, regardless of whether you think the thing that is your barrier is your age or your race, or sometimes people are too young or I don't have enough experience. There are lots of people who have a thing, one way, shape, or form, that they think is kind of a barrier for them. Age is one of those. So we'll work with that one. So what I really believe is that whatever it is you believe that you may be being discriminated against, is really dig under that and say, well, what is it about my age? What is it about this thing that someone's really concerned about? And what I think is that it's probably not really about age. It's probably really about, do you have the energy? It's really about your interest in learning. And maybe even more importantly, your interest and ability to unlearn. Because what somebody really doesn't want coming into any organization anytime is, oh, well, the way we used to do it over at XYZ is, and it's just like, no, I'm not so interested in that, right? So if you dig under, what is it? It's like, what is it about being, I'm 57, by the way. What is it about being older that really causes someone concern? And I think it's energy. Are you just looking for a way out for retirement? Your interest in learning these new things, your ability to unlearn unlearn the things maybe you've known in the past. And if it were me, if I'm actually, it's easier once I get to a conversation with somebody, obviously. But if I'm having and engaging in a conversation and I have a sneaking suspicion that that's going to be an issue, I mean, I think I would hit it head on, which is if I was interviewing with you, Teresa, I may get to the point where I said, hey, I know that, if I were you, would be concerned about my age. But let me tell you a couple of things. Now, I probably would have tried to exhibit it earlier in the interview. I probably would have been talking about energy. I probably would have been talking about ability to learn new things and new technologies. I may have even intentionally gone out of my way to learn Slack and how it works. I might have my own Slack channel. I might have found out if you had one and see if I could do that. So I probably went out of my way to actually use some of those tools and techniques to even communicate with you in advance. But through the course of the interview, I'll be putting on the table things about my energy, things about my drive, things about my ability to learn and unlearn. And then I could literally kind of say, hey, if I were you, would be concerned about that. And then essentially put it on the table. I think that what you'll find is that, pardon me, if someone had that as a real concern, you actually have the chance to address that real concern. If it wasn't a concern for them, I don't think you're going to do yourself any harm. So I would hit it head on, quite frankly, and see whether or not you can't just dig into it some, right?
Mm-hmm. That answer makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
A couple other questions kind of related. How do you overcome barriers at the interview screening stage when you are not only aged, but not necessarily attractive or in truth, unattractive as well?
You mean attractive or unattractive in terms of what? In terms of your fit for the role?
Don, I'm not sure which one.
Huh. All right. Well, let's just talk about, attractive, like in general, right? So what I think is that I've often referred to it as professional image. I mean, there is no question that I see people who have a profile on LinkedIn and, it's a picture, you see somebody's hand on their shoulder, they're disheveled a little bit. I mean, that never serves you well. I think that in a professional setting, attractive really is, do you have a professional image that's appropriate for what it is that's going on? Are you well groomed? Are you well dressed? Are you those kinds of things? So, I mean, rarely, unless the job is to be a model, have I ever experienced anyone being discriminated against for that, quite frankly. I'm certainly not here to suggest that it might not happen, but I've seen very little of it. And good news for you is that through the course of doing what I do for the last 20 some odd years, I've seen far less discrimination of all sorts than maybe people think that there is. So, I mean, there certainly is, but there's less of it maybe than you think. But image wise, I think it's all about, being well groomed, doing what you can, being professional. And I've rarely seen, relative attractiveness being an issue, right? Occasionally, but not a whole lot. Perhaps more important is what I believe attractive is. And can I share my screen? Would that be all right?
Yes, that'd be fine.
I want to share something with you. Okay. Can you see that? Can you see that? This screen over here? Do you see this graphic that's right here?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So here's what I think attractive really means in business. So if this red line represents today, and this is the day where someone's going to be hired, the truth is you're hired not for what you did in your past, but you're hired for someone's ability to see you as being successful in the future, that you've got the ability, you've got the energy, you've got the drive, you've got what it takes. And the idea is that someone's kind of going, all right, this person can help me achieve my goals. This person can get these things to happen, and they can project you out in the future. The easiest way for somebody to make that decision is that what you did in the past is in a direct line with what it is they want you to do in the future. You started as a junior accountant, you became a staff accountant, you became a senior accountant, you became controller, and you moved right up this line. That's an easy hire, super attractive, if you will, right? Most of us don't look like that. Most of us have this background that's kind of eclectic. It's all over the place a little bit. We probably had, some of us who are later stage in our career have had some really big jobs. We've been VPs. We've done all kinds of things. We've been at levels of, responsibility that perhaps aren't even interesting to us anymore. And what happens is that if somebody sees your background and it's all over like this, and you're leaving it as an exercise to them to figure out what to do with you, that's a big ask. That's very difficult for somebody. And when you look like this and your past looks disjoint like that, you're less attractive, and then ends up with a big question mark. I'm not sure, right? I'm just not sure. And so I think that the onus is on us to find a way to smooth out that past and do it in such a way that somebody says, oh, that makes sense to me. The simple version of that, and I'm happy to go into this in more detail sometime with people, because I think I've got a reasonably good handle on how to go about this. But I think it starts with first being very clear on where it is you're going with your career. Be very clear on the kinds of problems that you're motivated to solve. Be very clear on the types of roles that make sense for you. And by the way, the roles that make sense for you are the kinds of problems that you're going to be good at solving, right? And I think that when I see people who are having a difficult time finding a job, they're sometimes open to possibilities. And I really believe that that doesn't serve you well. And the reason why it doesn't serve you well is that if I have a group of people who are very clear about what it is they want to do, and I have a group of people who are open to possibilities, the group of people who are clear about what they want to do are more attractive, getting it back to being more attractive. And so I think the idea is, from where you stand today, projecting out into the future, the problems that you solve, and being crystal clear and motivated about that and what it's going to take to do that. And then you can look at your past and you can see what things have you done in your past that exhibit the kinds of characteristics that someone who's going to be successful doing what you're going to do now is going to have. And what you'll find is a lot of times the detail of what you did in the past doesn't matter so much, but the general characteristics of it. As an example, if somebody's transitioning into an IT role and they've been around it but never done that before, attention to detail, great customer service skills, making sure to get things done done right the very first time, ensuring that budgets are managed well and that we have a business impact. Those kinds of things set one IT individual apart from others, and you can probably find ways in your past to show exhibit those kinds of characteristics. And so the idea is that if you're clear about where you're going, and you can tell a great compelling story about where and why you're going, now you can align your past with that by showing where you've exhibited the kinds of things that's going to make somebody stand out in that role in such a way that somebody might be able to say, oh, that makes sense. To me, that's what attractive is, right? Be clear on where you're going, be able to explain why everything you've done in the past, how that lines up with where this makes sense, and then be able to demonstrate the fact that, you'll not only work hard, but you're motivated to make those kinds of things happen. And I think that in general, I found that hiring managers want people who are motivated, driven, and very clear about what they want to do. I mean, that's attractive.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive answer. I liked it. Just a reminder that if you're not speaking, please mute yourselves to avoid any background noise. I appreciate it. We've had a couple more questions, Gary.
Okay.
So how, going back to expressing, if you want to, are you still sharing your screen?
Not intentionally.
Okay, cool. So how would you address energy and ability to unlearn, et cetera, in the resume? How do you convey that if you haven't gotten to the interview stage yet?
All right. I want to address that in two different ways too, like I often do. So I think that far too many people play the game the way that they think the game is played. And what I mean by that is by applying for a job and waiting for somebody to follow up and politely sitting there with their hands folded, right? And waiting. I think that if you look statistically, regardless of whether it be your age or your energy or anything else, the majority of resumes that go through some kind of an application process are never considered. They're never looked at. I don't know what the percentage is, but simple example is that, there are some roles that my team are working on right now that over, a few week period of time, 487 people applied, right? I wish we had time to go consider all those people, but we don't. And statistically, what's going to happen is we'll probably, there'll probably be a group of, and I've turned off all the resume matching features, right? I don't think that helps. But, by the time we've gotten about 35, 40 people where there's a set of people who are, a reasonable probability. My team talks to way more people than most people do, but we'll engage and actually have conversations, 25, 30, 35 people. And out of that set of people, we'll start moving people forward. And what'll happen is, if we're only going to engage in a first conversation with 35 people out of 485, statistically, what's the chance that the person who's most qualified and everything else, the person you'd most want to hire, is in that set of 35 that we picked out? Statistically, they're not. Statistically, it's somebody in that other set of 450, but we can't possibly, there's not enough time to go through all of those. My point is that if it were me, rather than waiting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go find the likely hiring manager online through LinkedIn. I'm going to go find the recruiter. I guarantee you that when somebody finds me online and they reach out to me directly, they clearly get my attention. And the truth is the same for most of the recruiters who I know, not all of them, but a lot of them. And then what I can tell you is that every single hiring manager that I'm working with right now today, every single one of them, 100% of them, they wanted to hire somebody yesterday. They're frustrated with me. They're frustrated with my team. They're always frustrated with how much time it's taking. And if somebody were to reach out directly to, Mike Ryan or Jeffrey or Dave or Valerie or any of these people who I'm working with who were a good fit for the role, what have you, they saw the kind of problems that they want. I guarantee you those people would engage with those individuals instantaneously. And not only would they engage with them instantaneously, but they'd probably come back to me and Jeffrey would say, "Hey, Gary, why do I need your team?" If and it'd be like, "Yeah, okay, Jeffrey, whatever." We'd have that conversation. But I'm just saying, I don't know that there's a good reason to sit there and wait in line. I think the answer is that the only thing I've ever found that everyone who gets hired has in common, regardless of where you are in your career, the only thing that everyone has in common is they got to the front of the line. So when you apply for a job, you're at the end of the line. I hope that makes some sense, right? I mean, I would do the work to just skip a lot of that. The ATS doesn't work for you. The junior recruiters don't work for you. The people who are doing the early stage screening aren't working on your behalf. They're actually working against you in general. So, jump to the front of the line, go find the recruiter, go find the hiring manager and reach out to them, go try to help them.
And I think that shows a certain mastered level of social media too. And so that sometimes works against older applicants that, oh, they don't understand LinkedIn. Well, show them that you do. I guess.
Show them that you do.
Yeah.
If you ever want, I mean, I can show you some of that stuff like pretty quick right now, just to show you a little bit how easy it is.
Let's hold that thought. We've got a couple more questions.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about being told a candidate is overqualified or not a good fit for the culture? Isn't that often a code for, yeah, you're too old?
Overqualified is a code for I'm afraid to hire you because you'll either take my job or because there's a saying in my industry, A players hire A players, B players hire C players, right? B players are afraid to hire A players because they feel threatened. So that's one common thing that overqualified means. Why would I hire you? Because you could do my job better than I can do my job, right? So that's one. Another variation on the theme of overqualified is you're only taking this job until you can find a job that's a better fit for you, right? You just need the money, you need something, I don't know what it is, but I don't think you're going to stay here very long is another version on overqualified, right? So I think that just like the whole topic of ageism, right? I think that if you're in a role where you believe that there's a likelihood that you're going to be excluded because you're overqualified, I think you have very little risk at hitting that head on. And the phrase that I would typically use is, well, Teresa, if I were you, I would be concerned about this, right? I've held VP roles. I've led large teams before. I've made these kinds of things happen. And so if I were you, would be concerned about whether or not I'm interested in staying in this job for all that long. So if it'd be all right with you, can I tell you a little bit about that? And your answer, of course, is yes. By the way, if you get people to tell you yes, they like you more. So give them a chance, ask for permission, get them to say yes. They like you more when you say yes. It's this weird thing. And then I'd say, well, I'll tell you what, I've done that before, but you know what? I've spent years not sleeping in my own bed. I've spent years with the headache of managing other people. I mean, I've been there, I've done that, right? I really, even if somebody offered, I don't want to do that again, right? I'm done with that headache. But what I'm not done with is serving customers. What I'm not done with, and my list of things that I'm not done with is all the things that you need me to do, all the things and the problems that you have. I'm not done with solving this kind of problem. I'm not done with solving the problem. I'm not done with these kinds of things that you care about. And this is where I really want to shift my energy, because I'm so tired of spending my time and energy on these things that you're concerned that I still want to do. All right. So I'm going to literally try to take that off the table. I'm going to try to tell you why those things don't matter to me anymore. And I'm going to try to explain why solving the problems you need me to solve is the thing that I'm motivated to do right now. Now, hopefully that's the truth. Even if it's not the whole truth, right? I mean, the notion is you always want to talk and tell the truth, nothing but the truth, but not necessarily the whole truth, right? Our whole truth is sometimes boring. Our whole truth is sometimes irrelevant. But, there needs to be enough truth in there that you can really, put the energy and the motivation behind it. So I can look it in the eyes and tell you those things honestly. So hopefully that kind of answers that question, right?
Yes, it does. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, another one. This is quite long. I just recently completed an MBA from a top tier business school.
Awesome.
My fellow classmates are on average 15 years younger than me, but are having much more success at securing roles with top tech companies, despite the fact that I have much more valuable technical experience as a former engineer than many of my colleagues who have zero product or tech experience. It is so frustrating. Some companies may falsely assume that I am at a salary range that is much higher than someone who is younger, but actually my salary now is much lower than that of my fellow classmates. What is the best way to get around this problem?
Sure. I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, but I would be willing to bet you that the problem that you're having and where you're getting excluded is early in the process, more often than later in the process. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but generally for people who are asking that question, it's earlier stage in the process. And if that's the case, what's happening earlier stage in the process is generally you'll have people who don't necessarily understand how to appreciate the value of what it is that you've done in the past. They don't know how to understand really what it is that you've done. So the broken record part of me is going to say, if you can find a way to skip through that and direct connect with the people who really have the problems that you need to solve, right, that really need your help. I've had people who had the experience of going in for an interview with the hiring manager. They were later stage in their career, so was the hiring manager. And on the same day that they went into the office and had an interview that went pretty well, they got a reject letter from the recruiting team, right? So you'll often find a younger, much less experienced team on that end of the equation. So perhaps that's the issue. The other thing that I can tell you is that maybe the comparison isn't so helpful, because the truth is that in many situations, in many industries, it may be the case that younger individuals are getting jobs faster than you. Okay. I mean, that just became the playing field. So maybe, right? Let's just assume that. So I think that there's one of two ways to look at that. Is either I'm going to lament the playing field and wish that the playing field would change, or just know that I got to work that much harder. So as a recruiter, what I understand is that some of the roles that we work on are very difficult, high level of difficulty for all kinds of reasons. And on a typical search that we run, I or someone on my team actively reach out to well over 200 people, right? It's 227, I think it is at last count. And so we're actively reaching out to 227 people, primarily through LinkedIn, who are likely to be qualified, may be interested and available for considering a new opportunity. And so at some level, for those really difficult roles, we cover a lot of ground, and we cover a lot of ground fast. But what we know is it's by engaging with people, individuals, who we can find someone for which this role is going to be meaningful to them. And so maybe the same is true on the other side of the equation, which is if I was looking for a job, I would identify those types of companies that have the problems that I solve. And I would reach out to a lot of people, because what will happen is that, let's say that statistically there's something about your situation that makes it more challenging for you to get employed than it might be someone else. Okay, you can't change that. But what I can do is I can have 10 times more activity than somebody else, right? 10 times more activity. And, sometimes the activity still got to be quality activity. But in the same way as a recruiter, if I got to fill a graphic artist position, an administrative assistant position, I can reach out to 20 people and solve that problem. If I need I need a senior data engineer right now who knows high volume, high performance, international pipelines, right, of data, real-time streaming. So if you're that, let me know. But I need somebody like that. We've already reached out to about 350 people. I hadn't found the person yet. So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think sometimes the answer is you just got to solve the problem differently. And by applying for jobs and waiting in the line, maybe that's not the way. Maybe that's not your route. Maybe your route is go find the people and interact with the people and go find the people who need your help.
No, that's good, Gary. But like, what about salary? Right in the very beginning,
Right.
when you're asked what's your salary range,
Right.
how to get around that with this experience question?
I think that's an interesting one and a challenging one. And I'm going to tell you some things that you probably already know, right? So one of the things that sometimes works pretty well is the whole notion of, first of all, let me tell you that, if you're asking me about compensation, the first thing I'm going to tell you is, well, Teresa, I'm not avoiding your question, but let's just say the things that are really important to me are whatever they happen to be: the team, the growth opportunity, these kinds of things. And so depending upon what we find there, and depending upon how much value I can bring to you, then it'll be easier to, put compensation in that context. My expectation is that for a senior data engineer type role, as long as we're somewhere in or about, typical compensation for a role like that, I don't anticipate that we're going to have any problem with compensation, because, that's not necessarily what I value most, right? So that's kind of an attempt to try to end run it, right? And I actually believe that way too many organizations have the conversation about compensation way too soon, right? I just do. Now, we can't change that, but that's one approach. The next approach is, if somebody's still insisting, then just realize that I got two pieces of advice for you. One is just don't lowball, right? Because it's not going to go up. If you tell me 145, it's not going to be more than 145. And the reason why it's not going to be more than 145 is because the recruiter, whoever's talking to you, just put that down. Their neck's on the line. And I've had times when candidates wanted to change their compensation expectations way on down the line. It puts me in a very bad light. It puts me in a very difficult situation. And, I know how to handle it, but a lot of times people don't. The other thing that I would tell you is don't give a range. And the reason why I would never give a range is, if you tell me 160 to 180, the only thing that I heard is 160. And on top of that, I heard lack of clarity in terms of what it is you want. And literally, if you told me 160 to 180, I'd tell the hiring manager, no more than 160. We probably, we might even get them in the mid 155, maybe. I don't know. I'll keep an eye on it as we go, but we'll see. So all I know is that giving me a range actually pushes it down a little bit further, quite frankly, because I'm gonna consider the fact that maybe you're not real clear, right?
Oh, that's very helpful. Very.
Yeah. 157. I might laugh, like, why 157? It's like, well, we all know it's plus or minus a little bit, right? So, how about 157?
Because Gary O'Neill told me to be specific.
Yeah, right.
That's right.
All right.
Gary told us.
Yeah. If you give a range, then just hear the low end of the range anyway. You may as well take anything more than that off the table.
Good. Another question. Let's see. I've been applying for positions with large healthcare organizations. I've not been successful contacting internal HR recruiters on LinkedIn. Also, I'm not able to identify the hiring manager. Any suggestions? So I'm now sending LinkedIn messages and requests to a variety of employees who work for these companies, trying to engage them. So Gary, did you say that you had something to show us?
Well, maybe not an answer to that question. So let me just tell you that, I mean, I get it. I really do understand. So let me just tell you firsthand as an example. You know, right now we're working on a director of UX and product design role. For whatever reason, the kinds of people who are in those kinds of roles are really, really, really responsive. And we can reach out to 100 people and we'll get 60 people responding, right? And they just engage in conversation, right? At the same time, I've got this senior data engineering role that I'm talking about, and I can't get a human being to respond whatsoever, right? And so it's the most frustrating thing because I feel like I have the least control over that. I've never found a way to get around that, except that what we do is we make the assumption that the person who I'm trying to reach out to is just busy. I will reach out to them multiple times in slightly different ways, short, sweet, to the point. And over time, what I found is, I mean, I hate to be the guy who's bothering people, right? But what I find is I think it's the nature of your message as to whether or not you're bothering. So if I'm having a very difficult time with a well-defined set of people and I've more or less exhausted that set of people, you know, it's like there seem to be 375 people here in town who are about like that. And I've reached out to all 375 of them and I have heard nothing back. This happens frequently. Then what I do is, you know, I'll kind of go back through that set. Sometimes they didn't get my message. Sometimes they were just too busy. And then the nature of the message makes all the difference in the world. And the general notion is sometimes people are kind of taking, hey, I sent my resume. I just wanted to know if you got it. I'm kind of going, you know, leave me alone, right? And so if the nature of the message is, hey, do you have a job? The answer is no. Hey, did you get my resume? Leave me alone. Hey, I've got this question. Hey, I need to know. Hey, what's going to happen? Hey, you know, it's just like, stop, right? Just stop already. But something is very different when somebody's reaching out and saying, you know, hey, Teresa, you know, I'm a data engineer. I solve these kinds of problems. When the time is right, I will welcome a conversation and see how it might make a difference in your business. And then a week or so, you know, week and a half later, I might follow up again. You know, hey, you know, Teresa, I'm a data engineer. I don't want to be a bother. I'm just doing a little bit of networking. You know, when the time is right, you know, welcome a conversation and see how I might be able to solve problems like this for your business. And then I'll usually make a third attempt. And my third attempt generally says, hey, Teresa, I'm really not going to be a bother. This is going to be my last message. You know, solve problems like this. You know, when the time is right, I would welcome a conversation. And when I'm reaching out to a set of 375 people, by that point, I've sent out 900, I've sent out 1,000 messages. Always something happens. Always something happens. So unfortunately, my experience in that area has just been very polite messages where what I'm trying to do is contribute. I'm trying to give rather than take. And I know that somewhere along the lines, you know, maybe I'm bothering somebody, but I'm, you know, it's kind of what I got to do to get to the point where in my line of work, I've got something meaningful for someone in that set. So how dare I not reach out to them? Someone needs your help. Someone needs your help. So, you know, go find them. Unfortunately, I think the answer that I've got is persistence and polite messaging really does pay off. And I know that all of us have experienced getting messages that we prefer not to get, but just remember, it's as easy as letting somebody delete it, right? It's not that big of a deal. So I'm not sure that there's anything to do other than a little bit of persistence in that regard, right? One other final comment, though, is that if on their LinkedIn profile, and that's the primary tool I work out of, but I'll also use Google. I find other ways to contact them. I can sometimes find people who they have a Twitter account and I can direct message them in Twitter. Nobody direct messages them in Twitter. Sometimes I can find that they have a phone number. You know, today I've called 3 people that way. Hey, Scott, you know, hey, my name is Gary O'Neill. We've never met before, but you got your phone number in your LinkedIn profile. I just figured if you didn't want me to call you, you wouldn't have put it there. You got a moment, right? I mean, pick up the phone, call them. So the point is that as a recruiter, I mean, that's what I do. And so maybe that's what you got to do. So I wish I had a better answer. I wish I had a more slick answer for you than that, but I'm afraid that we call it pulling the plow through the mud. And I wish I didn't have to plow through the mud as much as I do, but sometimes that's just what I got to do.
I think we can relate. Yeah.
So apparently you don't work in marketing, Gary.
Right? Why is that?
Pulling a plow through mud is not the
how you describe
metaphor.
it. but it's good though. It's very visual. I got the visual.
Yep.
Okay, another question. This one about resumes. Let's see. I worked for one company for 10 years, but had 8 different positions during that time.
Mm-hmm.
They were mostly promotions, a few were laterals, da da da. Rather
Mm-hmm.
than making those 8 separate entries on my resume, I've tried to combine them into one.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Yeah, and so so is that the right thing to do?
Yeah,
Review.
not only is that the right thing to do, I think it comes down to be very, very as clear as you can on the types of problems you solve and the types of roles that make the most sense for you. And so if you're really, really clear on the types of problems that you want to solve going forward, the value proposition you have and the types of roles that make sense for you, of those 8, only pick the 1 or 2 that you're able to tell the story that's closest fit to those kinds of things. And so, less really is more in that particular case. The only reason why I'm speaking of marketing, the only reason why a resume exists is I think of it as a marketing piece. I think that you need to create a reason why someone wants to talk to you. And our humans' minds work in a really funny way, I think, which is if you tell me 10 great things, that's awesome. I just have this great feeling about you. Now, if you tell me the same 10 great things and you tell me 6 or 7 things that I don't care about, I like you less all of a sudden. And so having things on your resume that are truly non-related to where it is that you're going make me less interested in you. So less really is more. So narrow that down, be crystal clear on what it is, and find the aspects of those roles that exhibit the kinds of characteristics that are going to make you successful in the role that you're moving into. And the rest of the detail behind that, it's irrelevant and probably boring, right? So yeah, it's a great thing to do. Collapse it all together would be awesome. And if you're worried about the dates around all those kind of things, just don't put dates on it. Put dates on the whole 8-year period and said, held multiple roles, including this one and that one, right? And that's all you got to do. That's by far the best thing to do.
Good, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Let's see, another question. Is there a different approach for nonprofits, charitable organizations? I'm interested in working with those who help those who've been affected by domestic violence. How might I approach these organizations?
You know what? I think that people hire people. I don't think organizations hire anyone. I think company. Okay, I'm a little odd in some ways, but I think companies are make-believe. They don't exist. The only reason why a company exists is because we believe them to exist. The only thing that's real is there are people in those organizations that need your help. And so regardless of whether it's a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization, it's all about identifying a human being in that organization that needs your help. So, as far as I'm concerned, they're pretty similar. You can expect that the compensation is going to be lower, right? And you can certainly early stage in conversations, if you get to have one, express your understanding of those kinds of things and your root motivation, right? They're going to be more interested than for-profit companies in terms of your alignment with their mission and the reason why you care, and the whole idea that, it's the kind of work that you would do for free if you possibly could, but you can't, but don't say that out loud. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that makes any sense, but in my world, I work with people and I kind of disregard the fact that there's an organization. And maybe the reason why I know that is that right now, if I consider the largest organization that I'm working with, it's still small company, about 1,200 people. But if I'm thinking about the 6 hiring managers who I'm working with right now, they're all radically different from one another in terms of their behavior, how they hire, how I have to work with them. And there is nothing common about them there. You couldn't say, how does this company hire? And it's just like, do you mean, how does Jeffrey hire? Yeah, Jeffrey frustrates the crap out of me. How does Sally hire? You know what? She's awesome, right? Let me tell you about that. So, I don't think it's about the organization. I think it's about the people. Go find the people you can help and go have a conversation with them. And once you're engaged in that kind of conversation, then we figure out the details later on of how we turn that conversation into a job.
Very good advice. Another question is working online from home. So if you're applying for a job where you're working from home, is there any special thing that you need to do or convey or communicate?
You know what? I think that, so I was in a Toastmaster session this morning. I haven't been a member in a really long time, but I did a guest speaking kind of thing. And I've been on camera for a decade or so now doing webinars. And I think the number one thing that I would say, because I got positive feedback on it today, and I heard lots of not as great feedback on some of the other speakers, which is, that's your eyeball right there, right? There's your eye. So if I'm going to look at you, the weird thing is, if I actually want to look at you, Teresa, you're right there. So now I'm looking at you on my screen, but I'm not looking at you, right? So I really think that having a good mic, having good lighting, right? Being able to look the person in the eye, subconsciously, I mean, that'll create that positive image that we were talking about, a positive professional image. I mean, how about this? You know, spend $100 on a microphone, right? You know, spend $100 on a mic, you know, spend $100 on a good camera, you know, spend $15 on a light. So other than that, I think they're kind of the same. And I think that people, what my experience also is that everyone's getting worn out with the conversation about Zoom, and everybody's getting worn out with it. It's becoming a little bit old hat that it's, you know, new. It's not new anymore. So what we have to do is just treat it as it's just the same old, right? I mean, this is like every day, right? Here I am, I'm on this camera. And so the more you can feel the person in the camera, and the more it is that you can kind of bridge that gap. And it's weird because I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at the camera, right? But you know, that's, other than that, I think they're kind of the same, right?
No, that makes sense.
Everybody's also tired of talking about COVID, right? People are tired of talking all that. We're tired of the notion of unprecedented. And I don't mean in the world in general. I'm talking about at work, in at work conversations. I have hiring managers who are interviewing a lot of people. And when the candidates who don't talk to a lot of people, you know, that they, you know, oh, the Zooming thing and all this kind of stuff and COVID, blah, blah, what are you doing? They're over it, right? Well, they're trying to focus on work. They're trying to get past that. So for those of us who maybe have been at home doing some kinds of things, and it's still such a big part of our life because we're out of work or we're out of whatever it is, because of these things, it's a big deal to us. The hiring managers that I'm working with, they're just busy at work, right? And they just need your help. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Another question. Recruiters have told me that hiring managers explicitly reject candidates over 40.
Wow.
Yeah, the fact that they don't recognize that violates the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, or B, don't care even if they know, clearly indicates bias in hiring. So what thoughts do you have for what workplaces need to do to become more age friendly or age equitable in the hiring process?
My first reaction is that it's not the hiring manager who says that, it's the recruiter who says that. That's my first gut reaction. You got a recruiter problem, not a hiring manager problem. And if what you were doing was reaching directly out to the hiring manager, you were skipping the line, you were going that kind of stuff, you would have solved that problem, right? Yeah, I think there's very few hiring managers out there who, if that's the way they feel about it, would be stupid enough to say that out loud. And I think you'd find far more recruiters who have that notion than hiring managers who have that notion. Recruiting, one of the reasons why I like this business is that it's kind of an ugly business. There are a lot of bad actors, if you will, in this particular space, which makes it really easy to set your part. All you have to do is be reasonable, and you're able to set yourself apart from the rest of them. Let me just give you an example. There are recruiting companies right now who are, you know, they're in trouble. Their business is in serious trouble. I mean, mine's down a lot, but fortunately, you know, I've got some really good clients and long histories with people, so it's okay. But I know of the senior HR leaders who I always report to right now are essentially saying that there are recruiters for staffing firms who are reaching out to, they basically go to their job boards, they find companies who have jobs that are posted, they reach out in the marketplace, they're trying to, you know, I've got recruiters right now who are reaching out in the marketplace for that senior data engineering job that I have. They're doing a lousy job of it. I'm reaching out to some of the senior data engineers, and we're the only recruiting I run their internal recruiting. People say, no, I've already talked to somebody about that job, right? I'm not interested. And they didn't know how to represent it right. So there are some bad actors that are out there in the world. So my bet would be that you're running into a little bit of a bad actor as a recruiter, and it's probably not really the hiring manager. Other than that, right, I'm not quite sure how to go about that. I mean, the other thing is that if you have a organization that feels that way and is really discriminating against you because of age or because you're female or because of whatever it is, I mean, maybe you just dodged a bullet and you got to figure out, I mean, are we going to move into being in social justice? And that's what we're going to go do. And we're going to take on that crusade, which is cool, right? I don't mean to call it a crusade. I mean, we're going to take that on and we're going to change the playing field. You know, awesome, more power to you. I've been tilting, you know, I've been trying to make a lot of change in things for a long time, and I still do. And then there's the practical matter of what's the shortest path to going and finding an opportunity, and fighting about that is probably not it. So you gotta, you know, you gotta pick your wildebeest, so to speak.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I still think, bottom line, reach out directly to the hiring manager, go right around the recruiter and see if you can't prove them wrong.
Good, good. One more question. It's just almost 3 o'clock.
Sure.
How can I determine what the problems within a given department within a company may have? And I'm not quite sure, Sky, what you're meaning by that.
Well, I'm betting what he's meaning is, you know, I've talked a number of different times about find those organizations that have the kinds of problems that you solve, right? And if that's what you're talking about, I mean, what I mean is fairly broad classes of problems, right? So, you know, if you're a senior data engineer, and that's a broad title actually, but I'll pick it anyway, right? Since we talked about it a little bit, there are a lot of people who hold the title data engineer, and they do wildly different things. As an example, one person who applied for that job today does what's called ETL and database transactions and the rest, and changing and manipulating the data in data tables and things like that. This one happens to be the big fat pipelines that move the data between things, totally different piece of data engineering. And so if you were the kind of person who does the data engineering, which is these large real-time streaming pipelines of data through APIs and microservices and all this kind of stuff we don't need to talk about, then it's not too hard to identify the companies that have those kinds of problems. It's the companies who have massive amounts of data, who have enterprise class customers, who have those kinds of customers globally, right? And you know, you got to go do your homework and go find the companies who have that style of client, who have that style of application. And now when you reach out to the hiring manager, who is the, you know, senior director over data engineering or whatever it is, you can say, hey, Murali, you know, my name is so-and-so. We haven't met before, but I know you have clients like this, and the other kind of thing. I'm betting that you've got a team who solves problems such as this one. When the time is right, I'll welcome a conversation and see how I might be able to help you, you know, present APIs, do these kinds of microservices. And, you know, if you got the need to migrate some of these large pipelines from on-premise equipment to the cloud, I'm your guy, right? And so what I mean is go find those organizations that are likely to have the kinds of problems that you solve, identify those people who are on the team and the people who are the hiring managers of those teams, go reach out to them and say, hey, I think I know you. I think I recognize you. We work on the same kinds of things. And I would love, you know, if I can ever be of help, let me know. That's what I mean. You know, it's just doing a little bit of research. It's not that hard to do. It takes a little bit of time, but it's not that hard.
Okay. Well, Gary, this has been wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you all for participating in your questions. And this makes me think that we need to do more of this kind of format, you know, just the Q&A, audience Q&A, have an expert. So yeah, and we will. So thank you very much, Gary, and everyone else for attending.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope some of the things that I've said today are, you know, let me know, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm hopeful that a few of my random experiences are valuable to you. So that's my hope.
We're good.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.